Hey guys, welcome to today's podcast episode. Today we're joined with Mr. Jase. Jase, for I'm sure most coaches and trainers know who you are in the UK, but for anyone that's been living in the world, could you give us a quick intro who you are, what you do, and we can pick it up from there.
So I'm Jase, the founder, you can say, of Team Elite Results. We have a UK-based coaching brand that's grown over the last 8 to 9 years. We've been in the game a long time. We've got a brand of four coaches, five coaches, including myself, so four coaches on the team. And yeah, we heavily dominate the elite lifestyle phase, and obviously we have quite good experience in the bodybuilding prep industry because I used to compete years ago, but now I'm lifestyle. We're sort of navigating more to that. So yeah, we're pretty much heavy on the physique development kind side of things. But yeah, that's who I am, and someone that's been in the game for an incredibly long time, let's say.
One thing I always wanted to ask, even just from your speech at Josh Dexter's event, is like when at your peak. I remember you mentioning at your speech you were managing like 300 odd clients.
Yeah.
Was that just you doing it all, by the way?
It's just me, and that was more so off the fact of obviously we had quite a good brand established pre-lockdown. So obviously a lot of coaches came onto the scene in lockdown, where we had a brand before. So as you can imagine, when lockdown hit, the brand pretty much got amplified. Like I think before lockdown we had like 100 clients, and I'd always had a good level of clients. Just because I've been in the industry a long time, I had good recognition. And obviously, when we came into lockdown, that pretty much amplified very quickly. And obviously, I scaled very quickly by myself, and it was more like, I'm in lockdown, I can work with more, I can keep working with more. And obviously, that isn't always the case. And it taught me a lot about service and retention. Obviously, I was working extremely long hours. Just because it was lockdown, I had nothing else to do. So yeah, I did work and manage a lot of clients by myself, but that was the biggest eye opener because it did allow me to realize that service is everything. Service leads to retention. Service leads to referrals and people coming back at the end of the day. But yeah, that was a very interesting phase, but very grateful for it. Because again, I'm still working with some clients from that era.
Out of curiosity, what kind of systems and processes did you have for managing 300 clients? Because I speak to a lot of coaches, like looking to hire setters and stuff like that that have like 40 clients or 30 clients, and they're like, my head's falling off at that. So
Yeah, no, I think it's I'm quite resilient in that essence. So at that time, I didn't have a lot of systems. Like I didn't have the things I have now. Like now, I have company reports. I have everything now. I have KPIs. I have trackers. I have client trackers. In essence, like, but I didn't have that then. Do you know what I mean? And obviously now I do. So the biggest issue there was no trackers. It was me tracking it, my memo pad, my notes, and things like that. And that's again, that taught me a lot. It taught me, there was payments that weren't tracked and people with me for months. So when you look at that, I'm overworking and yeah, just I couldn't like tell you a lot of things if you ask me like what's the churn rate, how long's a client lifetime value of a client. So but I guess coming into business and building a business yourself, I was essentially quite blind to a lot of this, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, I hear that. And it kind of takes me into the next question quite well. You mentioned like you're quite resilient. What would you say in hindsight were your biggest character traits that almost set you up to succeed during that kind of lockdown COVID time and get into that kind of place where you could really blow things up from there?
I think naturally I've always been quite driven and I've always been quite determined, and not just in building a business, in anything I do. I come from quite a sporting background, and that's probably why I competed and I played sport at a high level. So I think I've always had that sense of the more we work, the more we receive. Not monetary, but that could be in anything. The more work you put in, the more results you get on the back end of it. And that was my case with that. I was like, oh well, if I work harder and I work longer and I do more content, off the back of that, what we're going to see, we're going to see more followers. Sorry, we're going to see more signups and see more people join us and stuff like that, if that makes sense. So the trait was just relentless hard work. At the end of the day, there was some crazy days where we worked extremely late, and obviously monetary is a byproduct of service, and I always say that to people, but it was just seeing something grow very quickly from scratch essentially, because a few years ago it was probably nothing. And that was the biggest driver. And even to this day, it's not monetary as a byproduct. It's growing into something that's recognizable, which is a big one for me.
And you mentioned the long hours as well. Like, what would you say were your daily task lists to go from that place, from zero to even 100 active clients? What would you
Well,
say
it
were
varied.
you?
Obviously,
Yeah.
when I got to my first 100, it was all my mindset was very different. It was I had to be business facing, my physique development, my education. I was my deed of trust. To scale that, it was more content of how I can help people, if that makes sense. So it went from the first 100 probably came off the back of selling myself. The step from 100 to 200 essentially, or 100 to 150 or whatever, that came from what I can do for the public. But that's when I learned the industry is quite shallow. It's not how you look, it's about how you can serve, in a positive way anyway. And then, then it's like, all right, well, how can we serve on a mass scale? All right, we get a team. And then you just learn how to do things easier. So now for us, it's like, how can we serve on a mass scale and make the process as easy as possible? Do you know what I mean? And take the stress out of it. So that we can there's a lot that had been done, but like it's if someone tells you there's one strategy to get from one to your first 100 clients, it changes as the industry changes. So it's quite hard to answer that. Do you know what I mean? Because it honestly it changes as the industry changes, and in the next 6 months, even though we're not trying to grow that quickly, the way we do things might change because it's a very fast moving industry.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Even just remember, like you say, like what the content was, the fitness content was like 5 years ago during lockdown was very different to what it is now. Um, and then you mentioned like the team building side of things and growing that. Like, what would you say were your kind of essential kind of hires? Like, when would you hire what person in your team? Or again, is that very, very dependent from a?
I think it depends. I think what we see on social media now is people hire too early. People hire because it's cool to say you've got another coach. It's cool to say you've got a team, but I scaled till I physically started going backwards in service. And that's when I hired. I hired when I couldn't do anymore and it was jeopardizing to the business. That's when I hired my first coach 4 years ago. Then on the back of that coach, I managed them well. When I hired another coach, I said I need a PA because the PA needs to manage payroll, content, what's been posted, what's been followed up, have we been active? And again, before I had my PA, I had a coach, but I weren't really on them, if that makes sense, because I was very friendly with them. Whereas the PA is sort of sits in the middle, delegates the information, and it's never personal.
Yeah, and that's something I massively took away from even just from your talk was just how much more you can manage and how much more you can do by just first pushing without kind of trying to systemize things you don't know. Like you've just not pushed yourself enough to know what's there to
Yeah,
systemize.
it's like people are lazy. People are lazy. People are
Yeah,
lazy.
yeah, that's the biggest thing I realized. Like it was very eye opening just hearing like 300 client numbers. I was like, that's like I never even thought that's like
Yeah,
that's
I don't do
possible. So
300 now. I
yeah,
don't do
yeah,
as a collective
yeah.
then 300, but I definitely don't do like because it's not productive. Like right now, I work on a much lower volume because for me now it's about doing things that actually move the needle in the business rather than just fulfillment in the business.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. In terms of like I think an interesting one as well that people always like the conversation about, especially kind of again, it might be like too early for a lot of the trainers and coaches listening to this, but like the holy grail of what seems to be on social media, like when you make it as a personal trainer, is when you can move to Dubai. So I just thought it'd be an interesting conversation on that. Like, what drew you there? What was the story? Why did you come back? Like, what did that all look like?
I'm a Dubai original. I went there in 2019 before it was saturated. I probably would never live there again. If I'm totally honest, I think it's too saturated and it's too repetitive, and I think the originality has vanished. I think everyone who lives in Dubai's content looks the same. It's all podcast studios. It's all beat talking in the marina with a mic. It's very simplified. So I think moving to Dubai is great for a network. I've got the best network. Listen, I'm one message away from Mike Thurston, and we can probably sit down and do a chat. I'm one message away from Larry Wills, Andrew Jack, and people like that. So my network grew massively, but as much as my network grew, I also took my eye off the business because you're essentially now in Disneyland for adults. And there's so much to do when you're doing so. Whereas we're in the UK, I do my work, I go home, I have a meal with my wife, and we get back to work. Whereas there, it's like I'm having a meal on a Friday, I'm having a meal on a Saturday, I'm having a meal on a Sunday. We're disguising it as networking, but them networking hours are obviously eating into the business. Um, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's like not all networking is going to move the needle. And now when I do things, it's like, how is that actually going to serve where we are?
Yeah, yeah. So it was almost like more moving back to the UK was just more so you can
Yeah, I
almost
think
get.
it was more stability. The business, touch wood, had always done well in Dubai. Sometimes I argue, would we have been bigger than we are now if I was still in Dubai? I don't know. It's quite a hard question to answer. Possibly because my network's greater, I'm more accessible to things at the click of a finger where I'm not here. Do you know what I mean? It's quite hard to get a podcast studio. It's quite hard to do things at the click of a finger. At the end of the day, but yeah, it's just there's pros and cons to everything. Whereas sometimes here, I've just got off a call before you to another coach in Dubai where we're liaising ideas because obviously everyone does well, so the conversations to grow are much more normalized. Whereas when I'm in the UK and I want to talk about business, it's it's not as common. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like it's very hard for me to go and say, "Oh, this is happening in my business. What would you do?" If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I hear that. On the networking side of things as well, like one thing that's just come up on the spot then is like you mentioned like your ability, and I even picked this up even just the Aaron Branch story at the event. You mentioned it's very strategic towards like meeting people, connecting, and kind of growing that. What would you say your biggest tips for people listening in terms of growing a network and kind of being quite strategic with that side of
It's
things?
don't be scared to speak. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, a lot of people, they go to events, they don't speak, and they leave, and they're like, "Oh, I should have spoke." Like I made it very vocalized what my goal was any event I go to, and anything I do has a sort of reason behind it. Why are we doing this? Do you know what I mean? What do we want out of this? And I feel like people do stuff and they don't really understand what they want from it. If that makes sense. And that's the biggest thing. Like, I have guys tell me, I went to this event. I'm like, sweet, how many numbers did you get? How many people did you connect with? You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest thing is you have to really utilize your network. Why are we on this pod today? Because you took the chance to utilize the network circle you're around. And I think in the UK, people are more of a scarcity mindset because they don't want to feel like they're asking. Whereas I'm like, if I want to know something, I'm going to inquire, ask, or pay for the knowledge. Whereas I feel like in the UK, it's sort of like frowned upon.
How did you get out of that kind of mindset? Because I like for me personally, I grew up in like originally from like Eastern Europe, like super poor, like even England, like both sides of it are very, very kind of like stay in your lane, work a 9 to 5, don't get out of it. And I found the UK is kind of similar. It was only kind of for me, it was like more just listening to stuff and like, but how was you always like this in terms of asking and getting out of it, or
Uh, yeah, because I didn't grow up wealthy, let's put it like that. And yeah, I didn't grow up wealthy. I think I've just always had, and I wasn't educated to the sense of being told this is what you must do. I think I'm just always naturally been quite big on self-help and self-development and naturally navigating towards podcasts, people, inspirations. I think that just taught me very quickly. I'm very good at being in a room and being like, I can take that idea or listen to that idea or take that on board. And I think not a lot of people do. I always say you have to really be present in these rooms. And even now, if I go and meet some friends that do it really well, I'm always present and soaking the information. You know what I mean? Because I came from quite a poor upbringing as well, essentially. So it wasn't anyone guiding me to sort of take that next step or take a risk. if that makes sense. So it's all been sort of, like I've always like, let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen is always my mindset and approach to things. But yeah, it definitely wasn't pushed from a home life agenda.
Yeah, that's what I find always really interesting. Is like it's usually like people that start with little that don't have too much to lose at the
Yeah,
start.
you're just a bit more hungry. It's like I grew up in a place where I didn't have much, so if it went wrong, what am I going to lose? And that allows you to sort of take the next step, essentially. And it was always that. And obviously, even sometimes the step I took in moving to Dubai, setting up a business, moving across the country, it wasn't always accepted by family. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not the norm. You're going to write diets for a living. Do you know what I mean? It's not what people deem it to be, if that makes sense.
This is where like it's an interesting one because like now you technically have much more, or even when you were moving to Dubai, you technically had like much more to lose in terms of like you've built this from practically nothing. You've done it like the hazard a guess today, like traditional kind of thinking would be like don't screw this up, don't lose it all just for the next risk. Like was it always kind of like what's the worst that can happen and kind of just push on, or was there kind of any moments that
I think you get to a level in business where you develop a skill set, whereas if things go backwards, you start to identify how to quickly overcome them in the business, if that makes sense. And obviously, when you've built a scalable business, one bad month's not going to cripple the business essentially. So you start to see trends, and that's going to allow you. But again, I was just like, I'm going to go Dubai, and we're just going to double down on marketing because I know that's a driver for any business to this day. And so I didn't really think it would go back. If anything, it did it really well. But yeah, I didn't ever think, oh, maybe this would go backwards. There's not an option with whatever I do. There's not an option that this could go backwards. Do you know what I mean? So it's not really. I don't think I've never launched something and thought, oh, what could go wrong?
yeah, and it's so easy like sometimes to go down the other route of it, and that's when you kind of just torture yourself for no reason. One thing you're very big on is your client service, your client fulfillment, kind of making that extremely good. So like LTV is very high, but ultimately like it all comes down to like just the clients in your programs. To me, it's like having the best experience and best kind of service. What does that look like? What are stuff you actually like look at beyond the numbers in terms of making sure clients are
Just
just very
fulfillment. Client, like people call it like client check-ins. I actually named the block in my calendar client fulfillment because at the end of the day, it's like a lot of online coaches at the end of the day, they'll brag, "Oh, I'm a business owner." I never see it like that. I see it as I'm a service provider. I don't, yes, I own a business, but I don't brag, "Oh, I'm a business owner." I'm a service provider and I provide a service. So even in my work blocks, it's not like, oh, we're doing check-ins, it's client fulfillment, leaving that client with a check-in essentially on that Friday where they feel good, or even if they don't feel good, if it's a stern check and they know the next step and they're feeling fulfilled with their goal and journey. So my days always start with client fulfillment, always, 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 and that's sort of, if I had to break down the three key points in my business, is probably client fulfillment, content creation, and then further education. And that's not like on direct dieting. Further education could be marketing, retention coaches, and things like that. But I think client fulfillment's always at the forefront because people are going to sell your service better than any other marketing tool. Like word of mouth's the strongest key point.
And what would you say are the numbers like you look at in terms of, making sure your business is moving forward? Like you mentioned LTV at the start, like lifetime value. Like, is there anything else like if you could boil it down to, I guess, three or five big numbers to make
Obviously, the
sure
main
things
thing is obviously business revenue month on month. But also, anyone listening to this, don't be alarmed that business revenue is going to be up every month because if you work in Sainsbury's, you don't get a pay rise every month. So it doesn't really work like that. And again, the big companies sometimes, they look at their company performance on a 6 to 12 month rota because again, not every month is good. And, businesses changes with the seasons and obviously, cost of living and stuff like that. So revenue would be the biggest driver. And then revenue of sales calls, so calls closed, because obviously that's going to be quite an incentive of new business. And then not for myself, obviously, if you've got a team of coaches, we look at the drop-off rate and sign-up rate and also the time of drop-off rate because if you are signing up clients for 12 weeks and they're dropping off in the first four, there's obviously a fulfillment issue from the off, and that needs to be rectified because we always say it creates 3 weeks to be habit. It takes 3 weeks to create a habit. And if they're not happy in that first 3 weeks, that's where the drop off comes. And so we look at how to minimize drop off if the coaches have a neg drop off rate.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. That's
Like one of the
yeah.
biggest things I see on social, like everyone wants new clients, but it's also you don't have to look for new clients if you can keep your current clients.
And it's almost like it sounds like you've simplified it a lot more down. Like coaches, myself included, it's so easy to go down a rabbit hole of like, oh, what system do I need to add? What AI tool do they need for doing this better?
Always comes after, like only now we start to look at what tools we can add in because we've got the base funnel down very well. But people want to add tools in before they're the basics.
Whereas from what it sounds like is you can get phenomenal client results and phenomenal um, clients like lifetime value of just literally just speaking to them via voice notes and phone
Yeah, well,
calls.
we do everything like via
Yeah,
Loom, via calls and stuff, but AI and email marketing, that's what we do all of that now, but that amplifies what we've already got. So what people do is they implement all that and try build a brand off that, but it's like build a brand and then amplify the brand, which to me is the better way, amplify what you've currently got. Because even if you are using all these tools, you're just amplifying, some people are amplifying a terrible service. And again, what that's going to do is, you're bringing in clients, you're losing clients. So I always say, like, let's look at the bottleneck.
and then this is a very interesting one as well. Like, is there any core pillars, core frameworks you use for your coaches now in terms of like teaching them how to deliver that exceptional service? Or is it,
We do team calls and we go through, if a client drops off, we do levers forms to find out the issue with the levers form. And then when we assess the levers form over the month, obviously we tend to see a trend of why. So we're very big on client retention. Like, yeah, we do. We
yeah,
have a leavers type form. Everyone that leaves gets that type form, and they can just be transparent and honest about the service. And a lot of the time, it says we're looking to return very soon.
yeah. And it sounds like it removes a lot of the emotion as well. Like people, quite. It's quite hard to tell you to your face sometimes if there's something
Yeah,
they're not
yeah,
happy
on the
with.
on the form,
Yeah,
obviously, say like if my coach Adam loses a client, Catherine, the PA, will send the form out and say, "Hey, we just want to find out how your service was to always make it better." And typically, would then get feedback. Like one of the feedbacks last week was like, "Plan's amazing, but it would be good to have like a bit of knowledge on high rocks workouts and stuff." So we look at that and we're like, "All right, sweet. So what do we need to do from that perspective to, if we get a client that wants that to satisfy that?"
yeah, yeah. I hear that. And then the other couple questions I had is you also do a lot of one-to-one mentorship for PTs for coaches. What are there any kind of telltale signs in terms of like, or even just people you speak to, like in events in masterminds, where you're like, okay, they have the right mindset or their headspace is in the right place, they're asking the right questions. And the reason I ask this is because it's so easy to just ask for information, and so many people probably ask you for stuff, but it's like, how do you reverse engineer it to actually succeed?
I try and give my time as much as I can to as many people as I can. I believe in that good karma, but a lot of people get on calls with me, and it's the ones that, if they sign up and they have a call bi-weekly, if they don't reach out to me between each call, that 2 week period, I'm like, yeah, we're probably just ticking a box by getting on the call. But it's the ones that are like, Jase, I've done this, what would you do here? And constantly speak and reach out that obviously make the most progress because you make progress when you're obsessed about something and you're constantly thinking about something. How can I refine this? How can I retune this? So I would say, yeah, a lot of people want to scale the business, but they don't actually understand what it takes to scale a business. Early mornings, long nights. Early mornings, long nights. That's what's going to scale. And sometimes in the business, it's about doing some things you don't want to do to move the needle forward. And when the going gets tough, as they say, that's when people tend to shut up.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like that side of things. So it's more like even like speed of kind of implementation. So like they'd have the first call by the sounds of it with you, or like rather than waiting 2 weeks to tick off something that's like
Yeah,
a
like
first,
mate,
yeah.
success likes speed. Obviously, success likes speed, and not everyone can work at that speed, and I totally get it. But if I'm getting on a call with a potential mentee and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've not done anything," or "Yeah, I'm gonna do it next week," and they've had 2 weeks to do it, it just sets the tone of how important moving the business is.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. And then like one thing I had as well, like more of a couple really good ones. So I was like, you've done a lot of other stuff as well. You're really pushing like the mentorship, the coaching. You've also had like an in person kind of stuff like coffee shops and stuff like that
Yeah, yeah,
you've
yeah. I've
done.
had a few businesses. I just like to
Yeah.
diversify my skill set because I just learn a lot from doing other things.
Yeah, so with that, like like how do you go about knowing like what's worth you putting your time into it and what might be a distraction, like out like I guess in terms of
External fitness investments, they're more like silent. I don't really have a say or I don't have an input. It's more like I'm a silent partner, and that runs itself from a passive point of view. But anything that takes my energy away from fitness, I won't put my name to it.
cool. So it's almost like that's just there in the background and it's not
Yeah,
like
that's
something
just
that
to
cool.
diversify a profile when again moving into other areas where I learn different skill sets.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, but I can't let anything like even the mentorship. I've actually decided last week to scale it down a bit, just because again the focus is not on building me, but building my coaches, and that takes a full-time fledged focus.
How do you like what's the vision for that, by the way? What's the vision for the next like 5, 10 years? Like is it just going like singularity or focus on that, or like I
No,
guess what's
I think it's building the brand to we're quite well recognized. Even today I saw someone there was like, "Oh, your old training videos from years ago were playing on the big screen in Benoist gym, like and stuff like that. We're still well recognized." So I think I was in a phase like, oh, we'll push mentorships, the brand where it needs to be. And then I had a realization the brand's good, but it's not where I want it to finish. So I actually said, only work with 10 mentees at a time. And I said to my PR, I only want to work with five. And I don't want to have a space where we can take on any clients for like the next 6 months. I want it to be very exclusive. And I want to funnel my time into finishing what I started with the fitness brand because I got to a point where revenue was well, teams were, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, we can park it here and start something else, but I'm just not ready to park it yet.
and like I think I asked you this in person as well, but like what's the like mindset behind that? Like what's the mindset behind pushing the fitness and continuing to push so hard? Because like I can imagine with where the systems and the team are, you could probably just slow down, and most kind of like people probably would. Like most kind of like day to day people, on the street would probably just say, I've done
What else
good.
do with my time? What else am I going to do with my time? I always say to guys like I get like a lot of guys get to my position and look at pulling themselves out, but what am I going to do? Because what lights my fire, I'm doing every single day. Do you know what I mean? I like the grind. I like the work. I like, doing what moves the needle. That's what lights my fire. So don't get me wrong, there'll be a point where we do obviously pull out and slow down, but there's not a huge driving factor for that, at least for the next 5 years. I mean, if anything, it's like, all right, let's double down for the next five.
I hear that, and one which was like interesting coming into this was, did you have a moment, I guess, from since building this where you're like, this is like one of the worst days business wise, like with, everything going against me? Like, do you have that story? Like, I know a few people on the
Yeah,
podcast.
this week's been very testing, let's say. It's been very long. But challenge changes you, challenge makes me more resilient. I look at very things from an optimistic. My busy days, my hard days, they make me more Teflon, they make me more durable. So I don't really see things from a negative notion. I've had some incredibly bad days, but it is what it is. I've had days this week that have been 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. with a business that's thriving. Do I need to go that hard? Do I need to, run through the business with a fine comb? It is what it is. But, I don't see it as a negative. It's a very blessed and fortunate place to work for yourself and have a lucrative business. So for me, it's, yeah, challenge changes you in a positive way. Pressure. I have a tattoo. Pressure makes diamonds. So again, that just that just signals how I always say I've got a really high stress tolerance, very very high. And I could do 7 till 9s every single day, and it wouldn't bother me. In essence, because the job essentially isn't done yet. Do you know what I mean? So with any endeavor, any project, with physique development, you're building a physique, it comes with peaks, troughs, and stresses, and that's anything you do in life. So yeah, I wouldn't. But no, I speak to a lot of coaches that work on a very smaller base, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so stressed. I can't do this. I can't do that." Da, 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 and things like that. Do you know what I mean? But no, I definitely don't see things as a negative.
Did you ever train that side of things of like high stress tolerance and getting to that point of having that, or was it just the
No,
background
I
you
think
had
it
in?
just came with it because when I launched coaching, it did right quite well quickly, and I just adapted to it. Do you know what I mean? And I think where I've played in sports teams and I've been very highly responsible of a lot of shit that comes with it and stuff like that. So I think that is also played a huge factor.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. So it's like there is an element of like you can probably like if you do want to do it, there is
Yeah, if
probably a
you
way
want to
to,
do
yeah.
something, you can do it at the end of the day. Like, there's not, I don't believe in excuses. I believe in you can give it your best shot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no,
Um,
go for it.
last couple questions here is just more front end marketing. I know you're kind of really going all in or not going all in, but I know you're really obsessing on kind of improving or like go all in on more marketing, more content. Like,
I
how are
love
you? How are you going about structuring that now? And like, what are your biggest kind of lessons for marketing a fitness for your fitness
what
coaching?
this game, you just have to be seen. Like you have to be top of mind. You have to be seen. That is the biggest fundamental. Whereas the people have got a scarcity of putting content out. And the biggest hurdle or bottleneck is probably my YouTube. I go through phases. So I actually had a call with someone today to really put a huge emphasis on the whole consistency with the YouTube aspect. But yeah, it's marketing drives any content is cash, man. We scroll how many hours a day? Do you know what I mean? I buy off the back of content. I buy all the time off the back of content. So why wouldn't I be putting out my content? Do you know what I mean? It's something I believe in. And I'm always studying content heavily, like deep research into content because it's what I enjoy. Like I enjoy the marketing.
And what are some of the pillars of like how you guys are going about doing your content now? I know you've got like I know you've got a videographer. I know you have like a team and someone that follows you around. But like, what are the kind of content pillars, or what do you obsess about? Like, I need to nail these.
It's actually education. It's always education, physique development, but the biggest one I don't do is sell my own journey anymore. When I was bodybuilding, my page was all me. I don't really document myself very rarely. So the biggest thing I'm doing over the next sort of 4 months is documenting my journey and obviously not, I'm always in shape, but like elite level shape and documenting the highs and lows, but more like the emotive side which comes with it more than just, oh, this guy got in shape, more like the emotive side as a business owner. as someone that's, got responsibilities and someone that, might be on the desk and have to fit meals. And so I think the biggest thing I don't do is document myself enough. Obviously, I'm not a bodybuilder anymore. I'm lifestyle, and our brand's moving more lifestyle. So I think the main thing we can do is obviously document me from a lifestyle point of view, because we did that earlier in the years with the bodybuilding and it worked. So it's just replicating that.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. And is it more like just documenting you being the achieving the goal that your people want to achieve, the lifestyle people?
Yeah, it's also that, but then I think there's a side of me when you get me on a podcast or you hear me at an event and people are like, "Oh, fuck," then it's that side needs to come out, and that's what we're trying to articulate and get it across. But it's very hard to get that side across, amongst a lot of results and a lot of physique-driven content from clients.
And I mean, like one thing I didn't realize before kind of meeting you and hearing your speech is like you simplify the information so well down and
Yeah, I
condense it
always
right
like.
down.
I spent years of trying to learn things, and they were never simplified. So I was always like, if I do something and I can simplify it, I'm always going to simplify it.
Yeah, and then that's where you get the very deeper side and the very kind of like methodical side of things when it's like longer form, which is really interesting. Last question to wrap up, as I know we're getting close to time. So if you could go back in time, Jason, speak to your younger self, like, and give one piece of advice, what would you say in terms of like this journey you've been on and everything you've achieved? Like, what would you give him that could infinitely make his life easier? I guess.
To continue to grow with authenticity and integrity. I see it a lot of the times is every single coaching brand stands a test of time. And we've stood that test of time multiple times because our consistent core message has been consistent. I scroll Instagram. One minute, this coach is promoting carnivore diets, then they're promoting this, and then they're promoting that. And I feel like the core message kind of gets skewed when the result isn't imminent, and sometimes it's delayed gratification. So integrity to your beliefs, because I know a lot of coaches that have gone against their beliefs to chase the publicity, but its integrity is always going to rule, and authenticity is always going to shine to the forefront. But the advice I would give is the exact same advice I'd have now. Obviously, maybe I would have done one or two things different, but I probably would have just documented like looking at it from an outside view, a third person. If I could have documented more when the brand was growing, like weekly authentic thoughts, I wish I could, to look back at them now or to show people come into the industry, because people look now and think, they've always had it there. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not, it's been a lot of graft, it's been a lot of late nights, it's been a lot of work that's been done to get us here. So yeah, if I could, I would have documented more of building the brand and like sharing wins and losses and what's gone well and what hasn't, because I don't think anyone in this space is actually sharing, like every mentor, everyone online sharing how they build a brand, right? But no one sharing the shit side of building a brand.
Yeah, and that's where I think back on like how cool it'd be to go back and watch like Mark Zuckerberg or someone like
Oh,
that
I mean, yeah.
building.
And again, it's like if
Uh,
they knew, I'm sure they would be documenting it a bit more now.
yeah, and it's like one of the things as well is I've spoken to you a couple of times and like each time I'm like I'm not doing enough because I realize how much how much you are truly doing, which is really cool. Where can people find you like for watching more of your content? It's mostly
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry,
yeah.
Instagram. Everything is Instagram. Jase_345. Off the back of that, there's links to YouTube. There's links to everything essentially.
Cool. I'll attach those or across on the YouTube video as well for anyone that wants to find you on there.
Yeah,
And
and we'll
thank
be
you so
getting on
much.
my goal this week is getting a lot of YouTube content at the minute. So if you're following me, you'll see that.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for jumping on, and it's been a pleasure.
Drop me a message, yeah?
Awesome.
All right, sweet.